And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game by one of my favorite designers. He's already released 2 or 3 games this year, but I have a newer one. This one is Bruges. Now this has been out for a while in Europe, and it was released at Origins by Z-Man in the United States, although there were very limited number of copies. Mine is a German edition, so take note that the components won't look exactly like this if you look at it in your own copy when you get one. But this is, of course, as I said, a Feld game in which you're going to be using cards as the primary component that will drive most of your actions. And some of those actions will take place on a board, but the board is really secondary to the card use. Anyhow, real quick, we're going to take a look at what you get inside of this box. And again, reminder, these are foreign components. We'll see how the game plays, and then we'll come back here and we'll get my final opinions on Bruges. So here you can see the setup for Bruges. Now I've set up for a 4-player game, and that's the maximum number of players this game can handle, but it does play down to 2. Now what we're looking at here is a board with a city area on it. There's several different important areas of this board. We have areas for placement of dice. We have areas for the movement of along this kind of a reputation track, and whoever's the furthest along this track will get the most points. We have areas to build your canals. Each player has kind of their own area here. So green's area is this section of wall and this section of wall, while red's is here and here. We have, of course, the victory point track, and that's really the majority of what the board is used for. A lot of the game is actually going to be played out using these cards. Now, in addition, each player is going to have several things. They're going to have these 3 little markers here that are potentially worth 4 victory points. They're going to have a thing showing their own player color. They'll start with 5 workers and 5 money, florins in this case, which they'll be using throughout the game to perform various things. Also, we'll see that green is our start player based on this little token, but who cares? At the beginning of the game, each player is going to get 5 cards. Now, the way that the game works is that these cards are very important. The color of the cards, as well as the reverse face of the cards. So when we look at the back of the cards here, let's take a look here. We can see that this card is brown, whereas the next card in the pile is purple, and the next one brown, brown, red. We have another purple, a yellow, and there are 5 different colors of cards. Red, purple, brown, yellow, and blue. Now, at any point, there are 2 visible cards because there are 2 stacks of cards here. We can see that one has a brown back and one has a purple back. And when I start on my turn, maybe as the first player, I'm going to get to essentially draft cards from these piles by choosing the top card of either pile. And what I choose is going to be important because the color of the card is going to dictate how I can use it in some way, shapes, and forms. So as the green player, we'll see here that the first areas of my canal are blue and brown. So I might want a brown card. So maybe I decide to take this brown card first. And I add it to my hand. Now, the next card choice I have is purple or purple. Not a huge choice, so maybe I decide to take this purple over here. Then I have my choice of yellow or purple, and maybe I decide to take a yellow. And then I see that there's a blue, so I take that one. And I have a choice of blue or purple, and I decide that I want another purple. Now, you have to be kind of careful to make sure that there's only 1 card visible here, because you're not supposed to have any future information about these stacks. And since I'm using a German version, all of my cards are sleeved and they're all, pasted up, which makes them a little bit harder to stack. But I have a tray that I usually use for stacking these that makes it a little bit easier to make sure that you only see 1 card at a time. Now, each player is going to draft cards in this way, making sure they get the cards that they want, or at least trying to get the cards they want from these piles. And the depletion of these piles is going to be kind of the timer for the game. When the piles are depleted, there's an extra stack of cards that you're going to bring in to replace the depleted stack, and when the other one is depleted, you'll split the stack up. But essentially, that triggers the last round of the game. And after that, you'll go ahead and score victory points. But each player is going to have their cards. After each player has their cards, you're going to roll these dice, and this is going to happen each round of the game. There is an undetermined number of rounds, but as I said, when the cards run out, you'll trigger the end. You're going to roll these dice. Whoever's the first player will roll them, and they're going to arrange them on this track from lowest to highest. So we see we have 1, 2, 5, 5, 5. Now, based on the 1s and 2s and the 5s and 6s rolled, things are going to happen. And first you evaluate the 5s and the 6s. So we'll see here we have 3 5s. What this means is that every player is going to get a disaster marker or something leading up to a disaster of each of those colors. They look like this. This is the blue one and this is the brown one. So each player would get a purple, a brown, and a blue disaster marker. Now, These do nothing on their own. When you have one of them, they do nothing. But you'll see on the back of each of them, they have some type of effect printed. For example, this one is lose 3 victory points. Or we have the brown one here, which is discard one of your people. Or we have the blue one, which is discard all of your workers. So when you get these, you're going to place them out in front of you, and you'll see, as I said, they do nothing on their own. But if you were ever to accumulate 3 of the same type over a series of rounds, or because one of the players managed to give you one with one of their cards, when you collect 3 of them, they're going to resolve. So for example, let's say through future rounds, I were to get 3 browns. When that happens, I'm going to turn them in immediately, and I'm going to lose one of my people. You don't know what that means yet, but it's bad, and these are effects you don't want to happen, and there are ways to prevent these from happening throughout the game. So as those accumulate, you're going to want to try and find ways to get rid of them. But right now, each player would have one of each of those because of the die roll. There's no way to avoid this. Every 5 and 6 rolled is going to give you one of those tokens of the appropriate color. After that, you're going to evaluate the 1s and the 2s, and the 1s and the 2s are going to set the price for advancing on this track over here, which will give you victory points and is a condition for having the majority in something. There are 3 different majorities you can get throughout the game that will earn you bonus victory points, so this is one way to get one of those majorities. And the cost to go up is going to be the total added value of the dice shown that show 1s and 2s. So in this case, 3. But if this had been a 2, the price would be 4. And that price is paid in florins. So if you have the money and you would like to pay it, in turn order you may pay and move up on the track. So maybe green decides it's worth 3 florins. He pays to move up on the track. And maybe 2 of the other players do, but red decides that he doesn't want to spend his money on that this turn. After you've done this, you're going to go through and take action rounds. And action rounds are where the real meat of the game is, and there are many different actions you can take, but they're all going to involve these cards that you have in your hand. You're going to play 4 action rounds per turn of the game, you might say. So you're going to go through, each player is going to get 4 actions on their turns, and of course the trick, as in many Stefan Feld games, is to get additional actions through the use of your cards in clever ways, and through getting the right cards out onto the table. Now, as I said, you're going to use these cards to take actions, and when you drew them, you only knew the color of the card. Now, of course, the colors match on the opposite side, so the purple card is purple. But each card will show you on it what the actions that can be done are with that card, and they're all the same for the most part. So you'll see along this right-hand side, there is iconography telling you what may be done with a card, and that's going to be the same on all of these cards. The only place they're going to differ is in the person that's depicted on the card. We'll see that this one here is the chandelier, but the next one here, chandler, not chandelier, he's not a light fixture, but the next one here is the guild master, or the one after that is the accountant. And each of these cards is going to have a different person on them. Some of them may have similar effects, but they all have different names. Now, each card may be used on your turn for one of several different things. For example, I can discard a card for 2 workers. I could discard this card and get 2 purple workers because it's a purple card. And I would simply take the workers, add them to my supply, and I have those workers. Workers used for various things later. We can see here that I can discard the card to get money. That's what this second symbol means. I may discard this card and get money equal to the number of pips shown on the appropriately colored die. So if I discard Mr. Purple here, I get 5 florins. Simple as that. I may discard the card in order to get rid of an appropriately colored disaster marker. So if I'm getting close to 3, meaning I have 2 purple disaster markers, I could discard this and get rid of that marker. In addition, when I do this, I get a victory point, because every time you get rid of one of these markers, it's worth 1 victory point. So that would be one way to get victory points in the game. I may discard this card and build an appropriately colored canal. We'll see that over here, my first canals are blue and brown. So I couldn't use a purple card, but if I wanted to build a canal, I could discard my blue card, and I would then be able to build this canal here for the cost of 1 florin. When I'm building on the canals, there's several reasons to build over here. First, if you ever get to the 3rd spot on your canal, which would cost you, of course, $6 and the appropriately colored cards, you're going to get 3 victory points. So that's one way to get victory points throughout the game, and they're all counted pretty much at the end, but you'll get 3 victory points at the end of the game. In addition, the first players to build an entire section of their canal are going to get bonus victory points. So if I were to build this entire canal area, I would get this bonus statue token here, which is worth 7 points at the end of the game. And the later you get these, the fewer points they're worth. So 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, all the way down. So that's how building canals works. You discard the card, you pay the florins, and you build the closest canal section to you. The next option is to use a card as a building. So if you ever want to use a card as a building, you simply flip it over back to its side here, and it's worth a point at the end of the game. But importantly, buildings, when you play them, may hold people. Now, people, of course, are the cards, the big part of the card function, so they can either be used for any of the functions along the right-hand side, or they can be played as people. But if you play this face down, you must discard a worker of the appropriate color. You place the building, and the player builds that building. It's worth a victory point at the end of the game and holds one person. Now, as I said, the last action you can take with a card is to use it as its person, and that all people have costs associated with playing them. So you'll see here, this guy costs $3 to play to the table, and has an ability on it. Additionally, it's worth 1 victory point, and the victory point values of people are always associated with how much they cost. So a 0 cost person is worth 0 victory points, but a 3 cost person worth 1, a 6 cost person worth 2, a 9 worth 3, and a 12 worth 4. So the more they cost, the more victory points they're going to be worth. Each of these people has different effects on them, and the status of the effect happens at certain times. So for example, we'll see that this one has an infinity symbol here. It means that this effect is always in play. So the Highwayman says if you play him to the table, each time another player plays a person, you get 2 gold, which is actually florins, of course, and that he is an underworld person. Now this only matters for the effects of some cards that say gain money or gain workers or gain victory points based on the number of underworlds that you have in your area. But importantly, every time you want to play a person to the table, you must have a house to put them in. So if I have a house, I may put a person in there. The color of the house does not matter. It does not have to match the color of the person, but note that they're each worth 1 victory point at the end of the game, plus the victory point value of the people you have. So the infinity symbol means that it happens all the time, as opposed to the worker symbol here. This one shows a purple worker on it, which means that during one of your action phases, in addition to taking your action for the turn by using one of your cards for either these, or by playing it as a person, you can place a purple worker on this. And it says here, the Market Woman, when you place a purple worker on here, you get 3 florins. And you can do that, of course, once per full turn. You can't do it each time you take a turn, but by placing a worker, or by returning a worker, I should say, you get 3 florins. So those, you place workers on them. Alternatively, we have some that are end-game victory points. The Guildmaster here, for example, which costs $9 and is worth 3 victory points, says at game end you take 2 points for each one of your trade people that you have in your display. So he himself is a trade person, and for each trade person you had in your display, filling up your houses, you would get points. So that's those. Now in addition, there is one more type of card. Let me search through here to see if I can find one. There it is. They have this icon on them. It's an arrow pointing down, which means immediately when you play this card. So we have the Embroiderer, and he says you advance 1 step. So that would mean moving forward 1 position on this track, which gets you more victory points at the end of the game, as printed on the board, and of course lets you get one of those majorities potentially if you're the furthest along. Now, as I said, you're going to go through and you're going to play 4 actions, which means you're going to carry 1 card over for the most part. There are some that let you use your last card as an action. There are others that let you carry an additional card over, meaning that you'd have 6 cards at the start of each round. But essentially, you're going to play 4 actions, either by discarding the card for one of these, or playing it as a house or as a person, and having the ability for the rest of the game, as long as you don't lose it due to one of these effects. You know, burning down a house, which would of course make you lose the person in that house, or burning down one of your canals, or losing your money, whatever the case may be. After you've gone through and each player's taken their 4 actions for the round, you're going to evaluate the majorities on the board. There are 3 potential majorities. You'll see here we have canals. Whoever has built the most canals. And if there's one clear person who's built the most canals, they'll flip this over. And that will give them 4 points at the end of the game. In addition, you're going to look and see who's the furthest along this track, and if there's a clear majority, one person further along the track than the rest, they'll flip this over, and they get 4 points at the end of the game. Finally, you'll see who has the most people played out in front of them. That's houses filled with people, and if there's a clear majority, they flip this over, and they get 4 points. These are not things that you have to maintain for the rest of the game. They are one-time checks. So if you have any of these majorities at any point throughout the game, you'll flip this token over, and you will get the appropriate victory points at the end of the game. And then you can lose that majority, and it doesn't matter. So you can get all 3 majorities throughout the game, and multiple people may get the same majority. You're going to play on in this way, as I said, until one of these 2 piles runs out, at which point you will replace it with the extra pile that you set aside at the start of the game. This will trigger the last round of the game, and at the end of that round you will of course score points. Now, you get points for various things. You get points for having built your canals to the 3rd spot of each of the different wings that you have. You also get points for how far you are along this track, and for any of the majorities you've managed to pick up throughout the game. Your houses will provide points. Any of these statues that you've managed to pick up will provide points. And then, of course, the people that you played will provide the points printed on them, as well as the points that they may have for having endgame point effects, such as the Guildmaster that I showed you earlier. And whoever manages to get the most points through best managing their money, using their cards to get money or to take effects to build canals and to place out people in buildings, is going to be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Bruges by Stefan Feld, a game that I went out of my way to get a copy of when it was released. Because I was unable to get one of the American copies, I, of course, got a European copy. But I'm not at all upset that I did, because this is a great game. Now, the game uses basically one component to accomplish all of its different actions, and I think this is where Stefan Feld really shines. He manages to focus on one component, for example, in this case, cards, but sometimes in Castles of Burgundy, it's dice, or in Trajan, it's really that Mancala board that you're moving pieces around. He focuses all of his actions on this one type of component, but using that component, he accomplishes varied things. So you can get victory points in a whole variety of different ways. All of the cards serve different purposes, and you just have to figure out how you're going to use that one component to accomplish your goals. And Bruges does this beautifully. You focus on those cards, you accomplish everything with the cards, and the gameplay really feels natural. Now, this isn't the complexity of Trajan. You don't have the Mancala mechanism chaining with the board, chaining with the cards, chaining with all these various different things. So there's not that level of complexity. And I think that makes this a little bit more natural of a game. It feels a little bit easier to teach. It's definitely a lot easier to play, but it still has the complexity in terms of the strategies. So I would definitely suggest checking out Bruges. It's not my favorite Feld, but it's certainly very high on the list, and one that I would suggest to other people, especially once it becomes more widely available in the United States.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.